Here we go. So without further ado, here's our guest tonight, Eric Eaton. Go ahead,
Uh,
Eric.
hey, uh, thank you for that lovely introduction. It was my joy that summer too to spend time with you in places that the average person cannot even get access to. So thank you for that. And to everyone else who might be in the audience who I know, thank you too. It was a great spending time with you as well, and I hope our paths cross again. I'm always flattered by how many people show up to these things. I'm encouraged though, because it means that maybe people really are interested in looking at insects after all, and not just considering them bird food, like I describe in the blog post I just released today. But what I want to do this evening is share with you some of the rewards of looking at insects, and there are many that share similarities with why we watch birds. I want to talk a little bit about the challenges of bug watching, because of course there are many, and then address briefly the how of bug watching. I can't give all my secrets away, by the way, because I'm writing a new book about observing insects, and so that goes into much more detail about the how of it. And I want to conclude by talking a little bit about insect decline, what why that's happening, and then finish with the biggest thing you can do to help boost or at least halt insect decline. And it's not what you think. But it's the elephant in the room that we all need to be talking about. So with that cliffhanger in mind, this is my spark bug, by the way. When I was a kid, I remember seeing a fork-tailed bush-cated land in the rhododendron in front of our house in Oregon, and it started singing, and soon a female joined him, and then they started mating, and so that was my first real dramatic exposure to to insect behavior. We tend to think of insect watching as something for children. We say they're closer to the ground. They have an eye for details that we don't. And yeah, I don't know whether that's true or not, but I do know that bug watching is something for people of all ages. So why? Why should we look at insects? Well, for some of the same reasons we look at birds. Beauty. I mean, who doesn't like one of these beautiful, colorful warblers? And we look at butterflies and dragonflies similarly, right? They're so beautiful, in fact, that we sometimes consider them either honorary birds or something other than an insect anyway, right? But moths are beautiful. You know that because you go to Dave's Moth Ball every year, or at least hopefully you do. But there's a good many moths that fly during the day too, like this white-lined sphinx. And so they're far from drab. Many are quite colorful, even the ones that come to the lights at night. If you uncover them by day, you can see how colorful they are as well. Really, truly beautiful insects that don't get enough credit. But beetles too. They don't call these beetles metallic wood borers or uh, uh, jewel beetles for nothing. They're very colorful, many of them, very metallic in many cases, like this red-legged buprestid I found on a log here in Leavenworth, Kansas. And tiger beetles. These are all kinds of exciting because they're very colorful. They're easy to spot. They're relatively large, a quarter inch or to half an inch, and they behave a lot like sanderlings. That would be a good example where they run full speed, stop, and then run again. And if you startle them, they fly a short distance, land again, and then repeat. They're predatory on other insects. You tend to find them in open habitats like dunes or lake shores along rivers, that kind of thing, and on sunlit paths in wooded areas. Beauty can come in unexpected places too. This is the face of a female horsefly. She's barely still living. I think she collided with a car and is kind of on her last wings here. they lose these colors when they die. So the only time you're going to see these brilliant stripes, or in the case of deer flies, spots, is in a living version. Now you can't get too mesmerized, or else you'll get bitten by one of these things, and believe me, it's very painful. Well, insects offer a multisensory experience, just like birds do, including, vocal performances, if you can call it that, because they certainly don't have vocal cords. They don't produce sound in that manner. And I mean, I know it's a stretch to equate the wonderful warbling trill of a warbler with a cicada, the loud, blaring, monotonous sound of a male cicada, but they both serve the same function. It turns out that and both attract females. So, hey, you got to hand it to them. But I think we can agree that, our after dark hours are certainly enhanced by the choruses and songs of crickets and katydids, and even Nathaniel Hawthorne remarked about the choruses of tree crickets, that if moonlight could be heard, it would sound like that, in one of his stories. And indeed, I think we could agree that's very apt metaphor there. I don't know if this is a reward or not. It's certainly a challenge trying to find insects sometimes. Birds, same way. Depending on what kind of bird you're looking for, they can be very difficult to spot. They don't tend to sit still for very long. So it's a real challenge to get to them. So you have to change your search image. It may actually help to think like a bird. Certainly, this chipping sparrow notices this queen yellow jacket flying by in her neighborhood there. But there are aspects to insect biology that make it even more difficult. Not just their small size, but many of them are camouflaged. And this is a pretty good sized moth. I almost put my hand on it when I was looking at something else. It just blends in so perfectly with the tree bark that is practically invisible. And many other insects are that way as well. Even the caterpillar stage, this is a different sphinx moth, but the caterpillars are very large, in some cases larger than the adult moth in terms of body weight for sure. But this thing could be in plain sight on your tomato plant, and it'd take forever to find it, even though it's there because it's left its frass. It's poop everywhere, and you can see that. Really, really challenging to find insects given camouflage. Back to rewards for a second. Species diversity. Maybe you keep a life list or a yearly list, or you certainly want to see as many different kinds of birds as you like. Well, insects can trump that by several orders of magnitude if you start looking. And I just randomly chose leafhoppers as an example, in part because they're very, very common. You can even live in the heart of the city and still see leafhoppers because it doesn't take much plant matter to sustain them. They're usually pretty small, like certainly under 10 millimeters, usually under 5 millimeters. In North America alone, there's 3,000 species of these things that we know of. In the world, there's something like 20,000. But again, look how diverse they are in form, in color, all kinds of different patterns. They often will show up at lights at night when you're trying to attract moths as well. So it pays to look at those tiny little specks because they can be very colorful like this. I mean, if insects had a fashion show, these things would be ruling the catwalk, I think, for sure, for sheer innovation in color and pattern. The polka dot things, they look like pieces of candy, some of them, just ridiculously diverse. Here are some that I found. They're among the last insects I see in the fall, and here's one in fall colors there in the lower left even. So, they very much trend towards the season that they're in. Well, another thing we like when we're bird watching is drama. Who doesn't like some action? And birds do this, but insects do it in spades. And here we have an example of insect territoriality. We have two male flame skimmers battling for the best perch along the side of a creek here in Colorado Springs. Sometimes territoriality takes on really big dimensions. If you've ever been walking down the sidewalk and seen a big pile of ants on the side of the sidewalk, you might wonder what the heck's going on. Well, it's a territorial battle between two colonies of the immigrant pavement ant. And these are very tiny ants. The thing that might be really shocking to you is to learn that these are very ritualistic battles. So there's few, if any, casualties to them. And we know how they start. And it's when workers from different colonies meet each other and at a boundary, and they're trying to establish which colony owns that boundary. And so then they recruit nest mates, and you get this big pile of ants. Now, I thought, okay, that's cool. So how does this end? How do you determine a winner? Nobody knows. That's how little we know about insects. And that goes to another aspect of insect watching, is that your likelihood of discovering something new in terms of behavior or the distribution of a species, whatever, is really, really great. Another thing that insects do, and of course some birds do this as well, is courtship displays. And these can be really quite fantastic. Here we have a pair of robber flies. The male is hovering there on the left in front of a female that is otherwise occupied eating her lunch. But he's doing his best to impress her by flaring hairs on the side of his abdomen there, these bright white hairs, and waving his middle feet, which are kind of like pom-poms there. And he also has white on his front feet there, displaying to her, hovering in front of her, trying to make her believe he's the best thing on the block. And if all goes well, insects mate. And if there's one thing insects do better than eating, is making more insects, like these grasshoppers here on the left. The male on top has contorted himself to meet the female's genitalia there. But sometimes no means no. And so you get situations like the wasps on the right-hand side, where the female is bending her abdomen in every way possible to avoid copulating with this particular male. Poor guy. Nesting is an activity that some insects do that is very easy to observe. And even with wasps, you might think, well, I don't want to get anywhere near a wasp nest. And it's good to be respectful and keep your distance. But the paper wasps in the inset photo there, they build these paper combs that are uncovered. You can watch the entire life cycle of a wasp in one of those cells. In fact, the ones with the white cap are in the pupa stage, one stage removed from the adult stage. If you pay attention to body language of paper wasps, it's easy to get pretty close. If you get too close, one of them or more will stand up on tiptoe and flare her wings, and that means back off. Okay, usually you get that warning before anybody charges off the nest to meet you. Sand wasps are solitary wasps, and most wasps, by the way, are solitary. Each female makes her own nest, and sand wasps dig these nests with their front legs have what's called a tarsal rake. It's a series of spines on the front legs. They almost literally row their way through the sand, kicking out copious amounts of sand to make these near horizontal burrows that terminate in several cells, where each one hosting a larval offspring. Really easy to observe. And again, there, if you just sit still, they'll come and they'll do their thing. Grooming is another behavior that insects have to do a lot, because they have to keep their sensory appendages and eyes and what have you very clean, so they're able to detect food, predators, mates, all of that stuff. They keep their wings and their legs clean as well, because that's for locomotion. The fly on the right is using its hind legs to clean its eyes. Okay, do not attempt that at home. Okay, not unless you're in Cirque du Soleil or something. Okay, not recommended. That is bug yoga. That's not human yoga. but really interesting behaviors to observe. They often expose parts of their bodies when they're doing this so that you can see characters you don't see normally. They're usually sitting relatively still, and you can get great photos that way. Some insects have defensive displays that they engage in when confronted with a potential threat. Sometimes they're aggressive, like the mantis there on my hand that's not too pleased to see me, and making herself look as intimidating as possible. But other displays are more what am I trying to say? More fearful, maybe. And so you have the elm sawfly larva that has coiled its head underneath the rest of its body there, and they can expel secretions that are very distasteful and repulsive to potential predators. Hunting is another thing that you can observe insects doing, again, especially solitary wasps. I watched this blue mud dauber purposely land in the web of a cobweb spider on the side of our house, shake it vigorously, as in the top right photo, which drew the spider out into the web to think it's going to have a meal, and instead the wasp stung it into paralysis, and she'll take it back to her nest, which is a mud cell that she'll stuff it into along with many other paralyzed spiders, seal it or lay an egg on it, then seal the cell, and her larval offspring will have a meal that way. This was just amazing to witness. I'm surprised I even remembered to take pictures. Sometimes hunting is more sedentary. It's a sit and wait phenomenon, and that's kind of exemplified by ant lions. And here we see in the inset photo a larval ant lion. The adults look very much, by the way, like damselflies. But they dig, some of them anyway, dig these conical pits, usually in fine soil at the base of a tree, under some kind of rock overhang, in very fine soil that doesn't get wet. Okay, so you'll often see these little craters in the soil, and that's what dug them. They wait for insects to fall into those pits, suck them dry, and then kick them out of the pits, and until they repeat this until they basically reach adulthood. Molting insects, remember, have their skeletons on the outside of their body. So in order to grow, or in this case, to progress from the larval or nymph stage to an adult, they have to crack that exoskeleton and extricate themselves. This is a really vulnerable time for them because they're soft and they're not fully pigmented yet. And so this often takes place under cover of darkness, as in the case of this cicada from South Texas, emerging at the cover of night, and hopefully avoiding predators until he or she is fully hardened. Another phenomenon that we're starting to learn many insects do is migrate. And so we're all familiar with the monarch butterfly migrations, but there are other butterflies that do this too. They just don't do it necessarily annually. In cases of population booms, painted lady butterflies will move en masse to literal greener pastures where they can find more host plants to lay eggs on for their caterpillars to consume. If they stayed in one place, they'd quickly exhaust those food resources. Dragonflies, we're learning, also migrate. Why and how they do that is we're just beginning to scratch the surface of, but we know that some of them, like the common green darner in the lower right photo, they definitely make directional movements at certain times of the year, especially in fall. So there are community science projects designed to help figure out what's going on there. Swarming, swarm, the noun, when you see a swarm of something in the insect world, is pretty much a benign phenomenon. It's mostly designed for mating purposes, or in the case of honeybee swarms in the lower left photo, they're looking, half of an existing colony has split off, and they're looking to set up a new house somewhere else. So when they swarm, they do not have vulnerable larvae, eggs, and pupae to defend. So this is a completely innocuous phenomena a honeybee swarm. So if you encounter a honeybee swarm, there's little to fear. If there's a nest associated with it, then it's swarm the verb, and that's a very different matter, and you need to leave. But like termites and ants, they liberate reproductive individuals from the colony at different times of the year. They do that in synchrony with other colonies that are not genetically related, so you don't get a genetic bottleneck by mating with your own siblings. Midges, people often, top right photo, they often are considered the interpretation is that they're mosquitoes because they look very mosquito-like, but they're all males and they don't bite. And if you're the tallest object in the landscape, they may start a swarm right over your head there, and you can hear it. It's a very loud thing when there's a lot of midges happening over your head, but not to worry, it's perfectly innocuous. Sleeping. Who knew? Insects sleep? Yeah. They definitely have periods of inactivity. Obviously, diurnal insects are not active during the night. And so in the case of wasps and bees in particular, they bed themselves down, and often in these really weird postures. So you've got a thread-waisted wasp there on the left that clamps the stem in her jaws and then props her body out at a 90-degree angle and just hangs there. That's how she spends the night. She's still alert, but you could walk right up to her and she's not inclined to fly. Cuckoo wasps, like the top right there, they just curl their body around a stem or other piece of vegetation. They're pretty small insects, so they have to find a small piece of vegetation to do that. The cuckoo bee in the bottom right has just locked her jaws onto the end of this this piece of vegetation, and it's just hanging there. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think locking my mouth onto the side of the armchair and just hanging off that is going to be a good night's sleep. But hey, it works for the bee. Can't argue with that. Sometimes bees and wasps will congregate to sleep, and in these cases, it's almost always males. Not always, by the way, but if you encounter a large group of bees or wasps at dusk or after dark, these are typically going to be males. And exactly why they do this in groups, I'm not sure. Maybe it's to amplify their warning colors, even though they can't sting. Remember, only female bees and wasps are capable of stinging. But maybe this fools predators into not messing with them. Basking. Insects are cold-blooded, so they have to elevate their temperature to become fully active. And so in the morning hours, you may see grasshoppers, for example, basking. They present the most body area that they can directly to the sun, so they drop that hind leg so their abdomen is getting heated up. And other insects do the same thing. They kind of lean into the sun. I'm not having a stroke, I'm just demonstrating. Leaning into the sun and getting warmed up there, and then they'll go full speed very quickly after that. You can get too hot as an insect too. That's the downside of being cold-blooded, maybe, is that you can overheat. And so insects have different ways of dealing with that as well. Here we have a grasshopper that is climbed to the top of a pebble that's above the hot surface of the road or whatever this is here, and is propping itself high off the rock and drooping its abdomen so that the sun is not hitting its body full force. Dragonflies do the opposite. They point their abdomen straight at the sun. So again, they're limiting the amount of solar radiation their body is getting. Other dragonflies, like darners, will do more like the grasshopper and hang and droop their abdomen during the hottest part of the day. And ants will often stand up on their legs as well to elevate their bodies. Another reward of insect watching is the potential for discovery. This past summer, late summer and early fall, we had an American flamingo in southern Kansas. I know, it's just stupid how crazy that was. So that's what this photo is from. But the same thing can happen with insects. You can make all kinds of crazy discoveries even in your own backyard. This beetle is one that my partner Heidi collected at the zoo in Colorado Springs, and she brought it home. I was out of town at the time, so she showed me photos of it, and I said, okay, well, I know it's a flower scarab, but after that, I have no idea. I've never seen anything quite like that before. And it turns out that the curator of entomology at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science is an expert on scarab beetles. And so he told Heidi, he said, well, congratulations, this species hasn't been formally recorded in Colorado for over 100 years. And we're like, what? And, of course, it turns out they're common. At certain times of the year in certain places, I should qualify that. But I found them pretty dependably around Memorial Day weekend every year in Cheyenne Mountain State Park, which is in the Front Range foothills of Colorado. These beetles look very much like bees when they're flying. They're day active and they fly. They keep their wing covers closed, so they look a lot like a bumblebee or something when they fly. And I think a lot of people, even people knowledgeable about insects, probably dismiss them as such for a century. Another reward of bug watching is that you can share your experience with others. Now, this is a bunch of birders, of course. This is at the biggest week in American birding at McGee Marsh near Toledo, Ohio. If you haven't been, by the way, I highly recommend it. Yes, it's crowded. If that's not your thing, I can understand you not wanting to endure that. But we found everybody to be very personable and very polite, and letting everybody have a look at the birds. And you can get warblers right in front of your face here, where you can't do that other places. But the same applies to insects. It's now more of a social thing, thanks to the internet and more accessibility to other entomologists and insect enthusiasts. Heidi and I went on a ode blitz on the Gila River in New Mexico one weekend in the summer a few years ago, and the express purpose trying to find county records for dragonflies and damselflies there, which we did accomplish, by the way. But oh my gosh, between the like-minded people that we were out there with and this scenery, I mean, you can't beat it. This is just right near Gila Cliff Dwellings National Monument, by the way. Just beautiful place to go looking for anything. When we lived in Colorado, the Mile High Bug Club, not what you think, it's just a bunch of insect enthusiasts in Colorado, would do an annual grasshopper hunt. And we did this at a ranch that's 80,000 acres on the El Paso Pueblo County line. And there is enough diversity of habitats there, from dunes to artificial wetlands, that in one time we had 40 species of grasshoppers in one day. It's just insane. But if you're in the right habitat, this is the kind of thing that can happen. There are even events that you can participate in. I know, again, you're all familiar with National Moth Week. This coming year, it's July 20th through the 28th. And I'm sure we'll be doing our own events, hanging sheets and putting black lights in front of them, and maybe we'll try sugaring, since there's no bears to contend with like there were in Colorado. So yeah, it's you're contributing to our collective knowledge when you help with events like this, and it's a great social event as well. Okay. Now we come to the biggest challenge of all, which is trying to identify the blame thing, right? Okay, I have no idea what kind of flycatcher this is. I think it's from the southeast corner of Colorado, if I remember where I saw it. But yeah, again, insects, sometimes it's hard to tell, whether the same species or not. And when you throw in sexual dimorphism, it's even worse. I mean, here we have the common white-tailed dragonfly. The male has these this white abdomen with these black bands across all its wings. And then the female, on the other hand, has a brown abdomen with these white checks on the abdomen, and then spots on its wings instead of these bands. So if you didn't know any better, you'd think, well, these are two different species. Sometimes sexual dimorphism is even more extreme. For tussock moths, the male looks like you would expect. It's a moth, okay? It's got, it's got a full set of wings. It's even got the feathery antenna to help locate a female from the scent she's giving off. But the female is just this hairy blob. And here she's hanging off the cocoon she just emerged from, and she's completely wingless, very short antennae. She is emitting a scent that will attract the male. She'll lay her eggs on this cocoon that she has emerged from, and it will be her caterpillars that balloon, much like spiders do, by issuing silk threads from glands in their mouths, letting the wind carry them to the proper host plant. Very bizarre behavior. Another thing that throws a wrench in the monkey works is mimicry. And many insects engage in this, and many of them are mimicking wasps, like the yellow jacket there on the left picture. Many insects mimic them, including flies like this hoverfly. So, okay, well, how do you tell the difference? Well, okay, flies have only one set of wings, whereas wasps have two sets. Well, you can't very well tell that from these pictures, or in the field for that matter. You have to look really, really close. Okay, well, let's see. Flies have these huge eyes compared to wasps. They even meet in the middle oftentimes of the head, and so they're huge eyes. Well, okay, this fly's got stripes on its eyes, so you don't know where the eyes end and the rest of its face begins. Oh, gee. Okay. Oh, I know. Is antennae. Flies have really short antennae, and wasps have long antennae. Okay, well, this fly is waving its front legs around like they're antennae. So yeah, good luck with that. If you mistake one insect for another, even from different orders, flies are in a different order than wasps, you can be forgiven. Okay, even professionals, like, I don't even think I'm a professional, but I get fooled all the time still if I don't get a really close look. And metamorphosis. Oh, Lordy. Okay. Pardon me while I laugh at your third-year gulls and your fall warblers, but at least they still look like birds. Okay. With insects, the youngsters don't look anything like the adults. Okay. If you go through complete metamorphosis, you start out as an egg, then you go to a larva stage, like in this case, the caterpillar, and then you go through a pupa stage that's hardly ever seen because they're very cryptic and often hidden, concealed somewhere. And then out of that comes finally the adult insect that, okay, yes, I recognize that's a two-tailed swallowtail here, but making those associations between the young stages and the adult stages is so difficult that for the majority, I would venture to say the majority of moths, we have no idea what the connections between the larva stage and the adult. If you rear a caterpillar, you find and document that, chances are very good that you could make a discovery connecting those two life stages. And here's another example. If you find this on your rose bush, you might go, "Oh my God, it's eating the rose bush. I got to kill it." And in reality, of course, that's the larva of a ladybird beetle, and that larva is eating the aphids that are eating your rose bush, right? So, if you didn't know better, you'd make a terrible mistake, and you'd have more aphids. Same with this thing. I mean, this looks like, oh, maybe it's a little tiny slug even. It looks, that can't possibly be good for the rose bush. But wait a minute, turns into this flower fly that, as an adult, is a very adequate pollinator, certainly of wildflowers, but even other flowers in your garden. So you get a benefit both in the larval stage that's eating the aphids. Again, that's an aphid-eating larva. And then the adult is pollinating the flowers in your yard. Okay, so the how and why of watching insects. This is kind of the quintessential what we think of as quintessential bug watching, the magnifier that you're looking through at the insect to get a larger view. Yeah, maybe. But okay, what techniques do you use even to get close enough to do that? Okay. My friend MJ Hatfield, who's a remarkable bug watcher, says walk slow, look close, and be curious. And I would say you don't even need to walk. If you just plop yourself down at the edge of your flower bed or the edge of a pond or even a mud puddle, and just sit there and let the insects come to you. Sometimes they'll even land on you if they think you're just a fixture in the landscape. Way better way to go than chasing after something. So what kind of tools do you need? Well, not too different from what you use with birding. If you have binoculars, great. If they're close focusing that allow you to focus within 10 feet or less, that's even better. And you can, that way you're able to resolve details, right, of the insect without getting close enough to scare it away. If you have a camera, yeah, take pictures, lots of pictures from different angles. If the insect is too small, you might want to use a magnifier. These days, your phone takes better pictures than my camera, I think. I'm still learning my way around my Android here. A field guide can be helpful, but again, remember, insects are so diverse, your likelihood of matching a species at species level is very remote. But a field guide will probably get you in the ballpark, at least to order, if not family. And take a notebook, make note of where you went, when you went, the date you went, time of day, what the weather was like, what kinds of habitats you were in, who went with you, if anybody, and keep track of that, because that's very important data to go with those photos and other things that you're using to document. And then share what you find. There's so many platforms now that you can use. I'm sure a new one crops up almost every day. iNaturalist seems to be the one most people are using these days, in part because it doesn't matter what you throw up there, as long as it's a living thing, it's welcomed on iNaturalist. Bug Guide in the center there, that's for all North American, north of Mexico, terrestrial arthropods. So that includes insects, crustaceans, spiders, and other arachnids, but not marine versions thereof. But you can also even share it to social media, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. I don't do Instagram because they kicked me off for some unknown reason. But posting there will definitely get the attention of other people, and you want to hopefully recruit other people to the thrills of bug watching. So why else do you go looking for insects other than what we've already talked about? Beauty, song, the challenge of finding the organism, and bug watching for others. Well, you could find new information. You could track range expansions. The black dots in the map of the modest Katie did there in the lower right represent historical records. The red dots represent recent range extensions as documented by bug watchers. And so we can see clearly, northward movement of this species that was formerly considered pretty much a southeast insect, southeast and mid-Atlantic coast. So you never know what things you can add to our collective knowledge. Sometimes you detect a new species. Heidi brought home this wasp from her work again, and showed it to me. I said, "Oh, okay, it looks like a blue mud dauber." It was a pretty dark-looking insect. I don't really have many good pictures of that, so this is great. I'll put it into the casserole dish that we use as our photo salon, right? And chilled the wasp a little bit first so it doesn't fly away. Get it in there, and I quickly figured out this was not like any mud dauber I'd ever seen. And so I went to people who know more stuff than I do, and I said, "What is this?" And they said, "Oh, well, you just got the first United States record of this Asian mud dauber, Sceliphron curvatum." And we're like, wow. It had been detected in Canada previous to Heidi finding one. But now it's been documented over much of the United States. Whether it's problematic or not remains to be seen. So far, it is not. We also want to monitor things that are problematic, though, right? So, documenting observations of things that are known to be what we call invasive species is very helpful as well. You might also discover a new host association. Maybe it's a parasitoid wasp like the one on the left there that has paralyzed a true bug and is taking it back to her nest, but resting a minute before she flies away with it. Or maybe it's a beetle larvae or a caterpillar that you find out likes to eat a plant that nobody else knew it liked before. That's entirely possible. Now, unfortunately, the bad news in all of this is that there's fewer insects to look at now than there used to be. It may not be an insect apocalypse, but there's general agreement that insects are in decline both in diversity and in abundance. Why is that? Climate change is the big one. That's been going on for some time. I think we can probably agree if we think back on our own experiences, but it's accelerating now clearly. But the other factors we definitely know are harming insects: deforestation or habitat destruction in general, the scale and intensity of agriculture. We do deforestation to make way for agriculture, and the continued reliance on pesticides. At the scale and intensity of industrial agriculture, you can't suppress pests with anything but chemical applications because you're leaving no refuges for natural controls. Urbanization, what isn't plowed under is paved over. Sprawl and attendant light pollution and things of this nature. Pollution from emissions, of course, that feeds climate change as well. And invasive species that are in places they don't necessarily belong, that are causing harm at an ecosystem scale. That's probably not as many species as we think, but they're there. And I do want to highlight light pollution because it's an underrated factor. And I know we all hang lights out for moths and things, right? That's not what I'm talking about. That's a one-time deal. We do it responsibly. What I'm talking about is advertising signs, buildings lit up at night for security reasons, your own outdoor lighting independent of whether you were trying to attract insects or not. It's even the distant glow on the horizon of a metropolis is enough to disrupt behavior patterns of nocturnal insects and other animals that are nocturnal. Definitely disrupts reproductive behavior. It extends the period of activity for diurnal insects, so it shortens their lifespan. Lots of bad news about light pollution. So we need to think about how we're executing lighting, especially in urban areas, but also in rural places. Well, what's the biggest way we can help address this big problem of insect decline and decline in biodiversity? Let's face it. Well, is it to join a conservation organization like the Audubon Society or the Xerces Society, which is the premier invertebrate conservation organization? Oh yeah, sure. I mean, they do excellent work. They get the messages out. They're very professional about that. They do research projects. They restore habitats, protect habitats. The Nature Conservancy would be another great example of that. Yeah, please keep doing that. Was it to landscape with native plants or to do a pollinator garden such as this one in Tucson, Arizona in a public park? Oh yeah, definitely do that. We need, the more native plants you can use in your yard and garden and in your office park and around your churchyards and things like that. Oh yeah, by all means, please keep doing that. But this is the biggest thing you can do to help. It's stop consuming everything except my books. No, I'm kidding. What I want to say is stop consuming at a multinational corporation level of consumerism. Okay. Hey, I'm guilty too. I'm no saint, right? On a global level, I'm probably having a terrible impact just as an individual. I mean, I eat bananas. I drink coffee. Um, I love chocolate. Okay. Does all that make me a colonist all over again, or still? Maybe, if my habits, if my expectation is that people in the Southern Hemisphere should serve me and feed me first, and by doing that, I'm adding to habitat loss, I'm creating poverty, then I have to rethink my consumer habits. I at least have to scale back on my consumption of some of these things and think more about how I'm impacting the world at large, not just, like continentally and planet wise by my choices in the marketplace, which tends to be a global marketplace at this point. I have to laugh at these memes that show you different kinds of foods that are very appealing, and then they say, okay, one of these must go. You have to eliminate one of these things from your diet. Well, memes aren't thinking big enough. Okay, you're not going to see a regal fritillary in a cornfield or a soybean field or a wheat field, okay, because those are replacing the prairie habitats where these butterflies live and where birds live. You might see them on a properly grazed rangeland, okay? There are some ranchers that are very careful about supporting habitat, like the one we go to in Colorado that has all those different habitats. But we've really got to think critically about the scale at which we're impacting the world. And on that note, this is my Amazon moment. If you if you like me, you may like my books too. I'm told that if you go to the publisher page for Insectpedia and Wasps, these are both by Princeton University Press, and you use the code ERE30, you can get a 30% discount on them. But by all means, patronize your local bookstore, or bookshop.org is a new entity that is a nonprofit that's competing now with Amazon. And with that, I want to thank all of you here. Dave, thanks again for inviting me. I want to thank my partner Heidi for putting up with me while I put these things together, because I'm no tech whiz. Princeton University Press for being my publisher. They'll have my next book as well. Mentors, Past, Present, and Future. I didn't learn what I shared with you tonight all by myself. I've had mentors throughout my life who have shared their knowledge with me graciously, and younger people now are teaching me stuff too. I have to remember that, right? And doing so with a lot of passion and enthusiasm. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Eric. That was great. And there's always something to learn. Even, I learned a bunch of stuff on some behaviors that I wasn't aware of. So that's really great. We have a couple of quick questions. I know Pam Janicki, if you wanted to ask your question, we'd be happy to hear. If you want to put it in the chat or
just unmute, that's fine
maybe
too.
unmute. Maybe I can find her. She could unmute. I have a couple people here. Okay. Whoop. Let's see if that worked. No, I get B Heart.
Hear me, Dave?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I guess you don't get an image. Gee, I thought it was a great presentation. This is Bruce Hart and Eileen Goldstein in Williamsburg. And I don't know where to start. I thought of our ladybugs that we keep in our house, and I sometimes wonder whether I should be protecting them until nice weather comes. And we have a pollinator bed, a 5,000 square foot pollinator.
I wanted to stop at we just want to know if those indoor, I'm assuming invasive ladybugs should not be put outside
Or should be put
or
outside.
should be killed.
That's just one of the few things. If you want to respond to that, Eric, but also we've had Plant Euphoria build a 5,000 square foot pollinator bed, and if people want to see it or see our plantings, I could give Dave the information. And then finally, if you want to deal with three things, we have a few acres of fields, and we have herbicided the invasives there. I don't know, I guess I wanted to, to me, it's a balance. And what do you think about that?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for your service to our wild friends with your garden. That's and the fields for that matter. That's very impressive. And yeah, I wish everybody had the advantage of being able to have that kind of acreage for one thing, and then having the wherewithal to use it to the advantage that you have. So thank you. As far as the Asian multicolored lady beetle, I think is what you're referring to, that comes indoors during the winter. I mean, other lady beetles will do that as well. The two spotteds I know will do that, although I don't see them very often these days. The cat's out of the bag. Okay, I mean, they're so prolific now and so ubiquitous that it's a waste of time to try and control them. That species is probably not even as problematic as the 7-spotted lady beetle. From people I've talked to who've done research on them, they've seen a larvae of 7-spotted lady beetles killing and eating the larvae of native lady beetles. So, that's maybe an even more problematic species. But again, it's, they're so widespread that it's pretty, you can spend your time in better ways. Let's put it that way. And as far as using herbicides to knock back invasives, I don't know enough about botany and landscaping to know, and or invasive plants to know exactly how effective that is. I think it's kind of on a case-by-case basis. I think it has a lot to do with the plant that you're addressing, as well as the persistence of the herbicide in the landscape, that kind of thing. So I am not a person who can address that for you. Your cooperative extension agent, cooperative extension service agent should be able to help you with that, or maybe a native plant society.
One thing that we did notice about the fact that we've tried to handle the invasives, and we're also on a 3 to 4 year cut schedule, is the increase in our big blue stem grasses has been really marked in the last year.
Cool.
Between last year and this year, it just exploded, which was very exciting to see.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'd like to take
Thank you so much.
Bruce, why don't you give me some information later, and
Okay.
maybe we'll come out there for a field trip and
That'd
check
be
out
great.
bugs,
Great. Thank you.
The chat's disabled, by the way, so we can't put the address in.
Well, you got my email address anyway. Just email me later.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question? I'm not seeing any. The Q&A is active, apparently.
Yeah, I was going to say, if anybody thinks of questions later, please use my email address. Just let me know that, excuse me, that you were the audience for this, so I don't think you're spam or something. But I'm happy to entertain, questions. It's what I do, or follow me on Twitter, or I have a Facebook writer page, Eric R. Eaton, writer. But usually an email is best.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone for attending tonight, and Eric for your time, and always good to see you, and hopefully our paths will cross a little closer in the near future. So
I'd love that.
so you're always welcome, you and Heidi, and maybe we'll get to one of those, that New Mexico excursion that you showed the picture of. We were there, and what a great spot to have a beautiful stream and lots of friends and lots of dragonflies, and then the cliff dwellings above us, so it was really quite a thing. So it's all great. And with that, I'll let you go, Eric, and by all means, we'll do this more. And if you're ever in the neighborhood, you know where we are.
Absolutely. Well, thank you.
Claire had
everyone.
one question. Let's see. Wait a minute. Claire saw a slender brown wasp picking up a small stone or sand to cover a hole in the ground. Yeah, good observation.
Yeah, that sounds like one of those thread-waisted wasps, the Ammophila that's actually on the cover of my wasp book, and they will do that. It's like, excuse me, it's like you or me picking up a boulder in our teeth. I don't know how they do it. It's just ridiculous.
Yep. Yeah, very good. All right. Well, we're going to let you go, Eric, and thank you so much for your time and your expertise, and my best to Heidi, and off we go.
All right,
Enjoy
my
the day.
pleasure. Have a good evening.